Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. If you're an ambitious woman who wants to dominate your career, then you are in the right place. This podcast is co-hosted by Nikki Barua, digital innovator, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and Monica Marquez, ex-Googler, diversity expert, and senior corporate leader. From inspiring stories to cutting-edge strategies, you'll learn how to develop the skill set, mindset, and tool set to get future-ready fast and accelerate your success.
Hi, I'm Nikki Barua, your host for today's episode. Can you imagine a world where your voice is not heard and products and services are not designed for you? Today, we're speaking with Alfia Ilicheva, co-founder of Wynn, a nonprofit organization on a mission to close the gender gap in innovation. Alfia has held senior roles at leading innovation firms, advising C-suite executives of Fortune 500 companies. She's a frequent speaker at industry conferences including Fast Company, Grace Hopper, and South by Southwest. In addition to her many accolades and accomplishments, Alfia is also a Rothschild Fellow and a Presidential Leadership Scholar. In this episode, Alfia talks about why gender inclusion matters and how Wynn is creating global impact. Alfia also shares her personal journey of transformation from an immigrant with no fluency in English to becoming an influential leader of a global movement while holding a full-time corporate job and being a mom to 3 children. Alfia discloses exactly how she integrates work, life, and community service and how you too can manage competing priorities, achieve your goals, and live your best life. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com where you will find show notes and links to all the resources in this episode, including the best way to get in touch with Alfia. Welcome, Alfia. So great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. We're really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, you have this very, very impressive resume. You've done things that most people only dream about. So I'm curious to know, what is your formation story? Tell us how you even started in your journey and what has inspired you all along.
Thank you for those kind words. I would never say this about myself, that I have an impressive resume, but thank you for those kind words. I would say that in a nutshell, I would synthesize my story as a woman on a perpetual journey to find her purpose. So I would never pretend that I have it all figured out. So the things that I do for work, professionally, personally, through nonprofit work, it's all been a perpetual ride trying to figure things out. On my personal side, I'm a mother, probably my most important, most rewarding job. I have 3 children, ages 3, 5, and 7. Professionally, I work with corporate organizations, mostly the C-suite teams, to help them innovate their product, services, and experiences. And then the other part of my life that's really, really important to me is around civic engagement. So ever since I was very young, my parents have instilled in me this really big love and belief that it's important to give back to communities that I'm part of. So growing up in Russia, we were very involved in volunteering and so on. And then here in the US, I co-founded a nonprofit called Wynn, Women in Innovation, with a mission to help women close the gender gap in the innovation field. So we provide training, resources, programming to equip the next generation of women with the skills that they need to thrive as innovators across very different professions, from innovation jobs inside corporations, design firms, consulting firms, as well as the broader startup ecosystem.
So in short, you're changing the world while raising 3 beautiful kids, right?
I'm helping create the next generation of children that will change the world.
There you go. So I'm curious, you mentioned growing up in Russia. What age did you come to the United States and what was that experience like?
Yeah, it's as I grow older and become more American, I realize how meaningful and life-changing the immigrant story has been in my life. So you can probably tell by my accent that I'm from Eastern Europe. So I was born in Moscow, Russia, moved here when I was 12 years old. when we moved, I barely spoke English. We had learned British English in Russia, but really learning words like cats, dogs, and a few verbs, really versus being able to communicate. That experience, in many ways taught me probably what's most important thing that I learned my entire life is that you're never fully formed, that life is truly flexible. Because as an immigrant, you're basically transplanted out of your comfort zone, right? Your friends, family, community, culture, and just dropped into a whole new environment. And that experience was really hard. I mean, it was hard on not understanding the language, the culture, the values, feeling utterly alone. I moved here with my mother and my sister without anyone on this continent. And it was really, really hard, but it taught me that, even from ground zero, and almost nothing, you can rebuild your entire new life, which in many ways just showed me that when you have a flexible mindset, when you believe that you're not fully formed, that you can always become better, learn a new language, learn a new skill, even make a new family. Here I found my husband, now I have 3 kids, that if you have that belief, that mindset, truly sky's the limit.
That there's no end point. Perfection is almost the lowest bar because you're already done. And what you're saying is you're always in formation. You're constantly learning and growing.
Totally, yes. And, it's the beautiful side of the American dream, I would say, is that core belief that we can all shape change and we can shape our own dreams. So that's been, really inspiring to me. Living here and kind of seeing that we can always evolve. And I think it's especially important for women in our age. I've seen back in my Russian upbringing, this pursuit of perfection, right? Trying to be just the perfect wife, the mother, the professional, the expert. But what's been exciting about having that dual side to my life, both as a European American, is just seeing the beauty in the imperfections and how they can actually help you grow.
That's really well put. And it's no wonder that you're in the innovation space, because that's what innovation is about, constantly, evolving and with no end point. It's sort of this infinite level that you can achieve.
Totally, yes. It's the exciting part about innovation, to your point, is that it's constantly evolving. And I think there's an inherent vulnerability, right, in the innovation field, that you create a new product, a new service, new experience, a completely new opportunity for a business or for, frankly, anything, but you never really know what the answer is, right? So you have to constantly test things and then actively listen, be vulnerable, be humble, but then also at the same time be very ambitious, right? So that's the dual side that I really enjoy in my day job, as well as with Wynn. With Wynn, we're innovating we're innovating a solution to the gender gap in the world. In that we really believe that it's about bringing people along, it's about engaging men, it's about really giving women the skills to become very, very good at innovation versus just increasing awareness, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, awareness is really important, but how do you actually innovate some of these root causes of some of these gender issues? That's been super fascinating. Innovating innovation, I call it. Yeah.
So speaking of skill, what do you consider your unique competency or skill?
My unique skill. I would say probably good intuition. I think my entire life, that's been the interesting balancing act and the tension, is that my upbringing, my parents, the different schools I went to really focus on logic, right? Mm-hmm. Robust synthesis, analyzing things, creating recommendations. And I think I've grown to embrace my own superpower, is that sometimes you have to trust your heart, not just your mind. And I think I've been proven wrong in some cases where I refer to analysis on what my team should do, how I should create an organization, but really ignored my heart. And I think if you really want to build change in the world, if you want to bring people along and create something beautiful, that your heart has to be there. And I think in your heart is this intuitive sense, that hunch. And, to be honest, that superpower, I never thought it was superpower, to be honest, because I would get a lot of pushback that you shouldn't trust your hunches. Who cares about your intuition? Those are all emotional, rational things. Trust the logic side. And I think part of a superpower is actually realizing you have one, right? I always think about Batman and how, his superpower being a Batman actually spawned and was inspired by his fear, like his biggest weakness, which was being afraid of bats. So in many ways, I think in my life, it's also just being comfortable with your own authentic self.
That's fascinating, especially for someone who has a whole history and a track record of being in core innovation space, which tends to be fairly analytical and data-driven. To hear you describe your superpower as your intuition and leading with heart. Give us an example of where that played in, perhaps, either in personal choices or even at work.
Wow, that's a fascinating question. So when it comes to my work, I probably can't share the specifics because most of my work is very confidential and it involves some of the most high-profile projects of big companies, but I'll share the framework that I've actually used a lot. So many companies today, right, they're hungry for innovation to create something new, and everyone's focused on data. What do our clients need? Let's look at research. And something that I brought to the table is actually, great, let's use and embrace deductive thinking. Let's look at data on what your core clients consume. What do your competitors do? What are your core assets? Let's analyze all those things and put them on a whiteboard and leave them there alone. And then concurrently, let's embrace your intuition. Let's embrace intuitive, inductive thinking by talking to your core clients and quite literally asking them, what do they want? What are their emotional needs? What are they trying to achieve, right? So if you look at a life insurance company that's selling life insurance, I mean, life insurance to insurance company, it's a product. It's a financial services product. But to somebody who's a mother of 3 kids like myself, when I bought life insurance, I'm really buying a sense of security. It's a security blanket, right? So in case I die and my children are by themselves, that there is a cushion to protect them. So that emotional side, that intuitive side of, how do end users consume your product? What are they worried about? What are their fears? What are their intuitive sort of behaviors is something that I try to bring to every research phase of any client work that I do. That's a lot more focused on the irrational, emotional, what are those deep fears that clients have? Does that answer your question? Or do you want an example?
And oftentimes those get overlooked, right? We get caught up in, the one certain way of doing things that we lose touch with the humanity of it all. You've advise C-suite clients from across different industries, some of the most blue chip brands, done all kinds of incredible things. You're also a presidential leadership scholar. You lead a nonprofit that has created so much impact and is growing exponentially. What is your proudest accomplishment?
My proudest accomplishment. I think my proudest accomplishment is actually fulfilling a promise that I made when I was very young. So when I was 11 years old, my father, he passed away tragically in Russia. And I remember when he died, I was a child, I was young, but I remember that moment, that evening on a Friday night, 10 p.m., when I got a phone call that he died suddenly, tragically, that I felt a sense of complete and utter loss, that my life is not in my control, that I can't control my life, my security, my happiness, that wow, the world's ended. I don't have a father. I'm about to become an orphan. Life just ended. And I remember in that moment, I made myself a promise that I will never again in my life feel so vulnerable, that I'll never feel so hopeless, and that I'll never let my kids feel the same way if I ever have any children, that they should never feel the sense of hopelessness, this desperation of just, becoming an orphan, basically. Because after he passed, we had to basically move to the US. I mean, it was a pretty difficult time in my life. And I would say I'm most proud of actually fulfilling that promise I made, that naive promise I made to myself, because, and it took me years to really learn the way to really be in control of my happiness. The quote that I really love is by Catherine the Great. She was one of the most famous Tsarinas of Russia. She was a German princess brought to Russia, dropped quite literally into a palace, doesn't understand Russian, anything, the history, and then rose to run Russia. And, she would say that no one can ever be in control of your happiness or unhappiness. Get above it and control it yourself. You set the pace, you choose your happiness. So I'd say, for me, when I look at my childhood and that night, feeling very vulnerable as a child, very lost and hopeless, that over the years, I've actually found I found ways to control my happiness. In these micro moments is that when I feel that sense of desperation, when my body feels that sense of fear I felt as an 11-year-old, I go back and I tell my brain, you promised yourself to not feel this way. You have to get out of it. It took years, but I would say now I'm quite proud of just sort of controlling my own mind, in small ways as much as I can, but also teaching my children that, they're in their happiness is not tied to a candy bar or to what their teachers say or to what their friends think about their paintings. But it's really their own mind deciding if they're happy.
Wow, that's really incredible. And I'm sure our listeners are wondering, what is the secret? How do you actually do that? Because what you're describing is essentially becoming bulletproof, where you're not affected by what the world thinks of you or how someone is judging you or how your day goes. You are in total control of your emotions and your mind, and having that level of emotional mastery is incredible. So tell us some specific things you do that someone else can adopt from you.
Yeah, so I wish I had all the answers and I knew how to do this really well. I would say what has worked for me was changing my frame of mind. So instead of saying, don't be afraid, don't feel anxiety, is actually using those things as momentum. So for me, courage is not the absence of fear. It's actually a commitment to go past it and do things anyway. I'm in a job that is, it has so few women. I'm mostly in rooms with no women, and mostly consulting on projects that are that have no, it's very male dominated. And sometimes, I'm afraid, but I sort of let that fear, that anxiety sort of, take me forward. If I'm the only woman in the room and I'm intimidated, and sometimes people push me down, push me back, I sort of try to use it to push ahead. So that's been, helpful in my job. I would say, in my personal life with Wynn, probably this as well, but also just being more vulnerable. I've actually found that sometimes being open and vulnerable can also encourage courage in different ways. Those would be probably the two things. I think with women especially, and I found this with myself as well, is oftentimes, again, we want to be perfect at everything and to excel at every task, every outcome, every project. And I found it helpful that in those moments when you want to be perfect and you're afraid, just sort of let that fear drive you forward, sort of take you, be that beautiful channel to sort of push you to your next goal.
That's amazing. That's exactly what makes you such an inspiring leader. And I, for one, couldn't be more thrilled that I actually get to collaborate with you as we serve on the board of Wynn. It's been one of the highlights for me, is being able to be part of this incredible movement. Tell us perhaps, the initial inspiration that led to you founding Wynn and what led to that and where you see it going.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for being such a big part of Wynn, supporting us, advancing us, leading us. I learn from you daily. So all the thanks to you and your time commitment and loyalty. I would say, with Wynn, it's really been a very personal story to me. As a woman working in the innovation field, I found myself in this very interesting paradigm where myself and my really good friend and colleague, Maria, we were leading different transformational work for many different marquee companies around the globe. And we both said, if we zoom out and we look at ourselves, at our planet and what we're doing, there's really three things we're seeing. One, the world is changing, right? So innovation is really transforming the way we do business. From CPG company, financial services, education, even the public sector, digital transformation, technology, they're all changing the way we work and how we engage. So that's all happening at a very macro level, and that's big. And then women are not disproportionately engaged in that conversation. So as we then think about, right, just the evolution of humankind, there are these few marquee moments like the Stone Age, Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance, that sort of change the way we are as society and the role that women play. And then we've all felt that, wow, where we are right now today is such an amazing opportunity to not only innovate industries, but actually innovate the role of women in these industries and different sectors. And also to innovate the way we as society work. And we said, well, how would we do this, right? Well, if women are not in these conversations to change how education works, how banks make money, how CPG companies sell their snacking products, we need to get those people in those rooms. And to us, it was really all about finding resources, giving women the skills, the training, different opportunities to both enter the innovation field, right? And then also to upskill. So that's, that was the inspiration behind Wynn. On a very personal level, the gender gap in our field, which is quite broad, right? So within innovation, you have technologists, you have designers, you have strategists, product managers. It's actually quite hard to capture data on the gender gap because it's so broad and so massive. But one of the ways that the gender gap and the disproportionate involvement or the unequal involvement of women, how that became really obvious to me was when I was pregnant with my first child. I decided to create a book collection on books in the innovation field. So something that my mother did when I was born, she made me a book collection that I would read when I was older. So I said, well, for Adriana, I'll make her future innovation library. And when I lined up,
by the way, for all the listeners, that's a really great insight into your personality. Because that's what, you think about while you're pregnant.
Well, it's people channel their hormones and nesting habits in different ways. For me, I was like, I'm going to buy a bunch of books. I'm going to line them up and I'm going to feel great. I bought those 20 books on top bestsellers on innovation, some on Amazon, some in bookstores. And I lined them all up with a big belly and I stared at all these books and literally not a single book on my shelf was written by a woman. And I said, how is that going to work? I'm going to have a child. She could, and how would she ever connect to any of these writers? None of them are her. And, it became obvious to me in a very tangible way. And then when I did the research and actually looked at the numbers of how many chief innovation officers are leading Fortune 100 companies, only 18%. Amazon, the entire, what's their top innovation book list? I think 15% are books written by women. If you then look at the top innovation/design firms, 4 years ago, I believe all the top 100 companies, all of them were led by men. In the past 4 years, huge change has happened. And, when I say huge, probably I'm exaggerating because, it changed from 0 to a few percent. But, it's the change is happening, but it's happening slowly. But to me, that's the focus of Wynn, is really making sure that we create an equitable future where women are part of the tables that are making decisions on how we innovate the world. Because if we do that, then we'll have a chance to actually innovate our own role within this world, right? In a way that kind of makes sense for us, not just for the other gender right. that's making decisions.
So speaking of which, I want you to illustrate for our listeners that may not be connected to the innovation space at all, that it sounds like a buzzword that happens in blue chip brands in some lab somewhere far away. Humanize that for us and give us an example of what could the world look like if women's voices and perspectives and skills were not part of innovation.
Yeah. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. On the first one, so completely great. Innovation has become a total buzzword. And one of the things that I like to do both in my professional work as well as through Wynn is actually explain what it means in very simple language in a way that we can all understand. The way that we explain at Wynn what innovation means, it's the creation of a new product, new service, or a new experience, right? Mm-hmm. So whether you're a public sector team, working for the mayor, or you're a school, or you are selling ice cream, or you're a consulting firm, if you want to create something new net new that your company is offering, you have to innovate what you're doing, right? Because it's a new way of thinking. Now, your second question around sort of what would happen if women were not at the table, I would say you don't have to look far. I would say the world we live in today, I mean, this is happening every day. So as we look, a lot of the work that I've done was actually in financial services. So helping pension funds, insurance companies, commercial banks think through what is their future offering for different consumers. And historically, the way the sector has been framed and built was really anchored in the traditional male-dominated one breadwinner paradigm, where a lot of the products were built for that ecosystem, right? So if you look at, for example, life insurance, that even the pricing models, even the underwriting models, they actually bias men versus women because they have these inherent inputs and biases that basically predispose that there's only one breadwinner and it's most likely a male.
Right.
And that
it's almost like the paradigm has not evolved to reflect today's reality or even tomorrow's reality.
Exactly. Completely right. And, now we have our households are very diverse in this country, but I would say also the world. We have same-sex households. We have multi-generational households where you have the parents and the everyone living together. We have two breadwinner families. There are all these different paradigms now. And then when we look at, let's just say insurance again, that those companies are not equipped appropriately to service the needs of those people. So when I zoom out and think about, well, gosh, what's the impact if women aren't engaged? Well, if they're not engaged, then we're not actually servicing, protecting, enabling an entire part of the world, right? Because something like insurance is really important. If you're, again, going back to the example of if I'm a working mother, I have 3 kids, and something happens to me and I don't have a product that can protect me, I mean, we're creating a huge compounding impact to that household if I die because my kids will be exposed and left by themselves. That obviously creates more and more burn costs associated with other costs that have to be somehow funded through the government and so on.
Right.
So, that's one specific example. But I would say on the less morbid examples, even a company like snacking, right? Take Nestle, take Mondelez, companies that are thinking about what frozen food offerings they provide. I've literally been in conversations with some of these management teams where I'm in a room with an all-male management team and we are literally innovating what would working mothers want to serve their children at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. And then when I asked all of them, do any of your wives, do they work? And none of them work. And, and they're hypothesizing what would this woman need? And, we don't have a single woman from their team in the room thinking through what she would need on a Tuesday night. And, that to me is interesting because as we get more women into the workforce, they need a whole slew of things, right? They need to have protection. They need to have a portfolio of product services that can really understand who they are and their layered identities. So.
And, especially in an age of AI where AI, mimics human behavior or human emotions that get incorporated into that, the absence of a female perspective can have an exponentially negative impact where even today, I mean, if we're using voice recognition, but they don't recognize female voices as well or interpret that, or a self-driving car that is not designed for a woman to drive it and may have safety issues there. I mean, there's some real consequences of not having women as innovators, innovating and creating the product services of the future.
Completely agree. Yes. And I'm glad that you brought that point. To me, again, if we zoom out, right, innovation is changing the way we live, how we live, what we do. And if we think about that future, that North Star, it's being co-created today, right now, probably in this moment. And for me, it's all about who are in those rooms and how do we make sure that women are in those rooms at those tables. Because if they're not there, then the future that North Star is being created is not actually going to be inclusive and catering for a whole population of people that are on this planet.
Well, kudos to you and your co-founder, Maria, for having the vision and the passion to create the Wynn organization and the massive movement you've unleashed since then. One of the things that just blows my mind completely is what started as an idea in your minds has become such a huge movement with so many people volunteering their time and their expertise, and the absolute sheer commitment to the cause is incredibly awe-inspiring. What I'm curious about is that is a very inspiring skill to have. I mean, it's true leadership. And tell me, from your perspective, as the leader of that movement, as in some ways the revolutionary, right? How have you brought people along? What helps you bring them along? How do you find them? How do you get them on board? How do you keep them inspired and motivated? And I ask that because every leader, every person, every woman who wants to be a leader, that's an important skill and a mindset to develop.
Yeah. For me, Wynn truly has been such an amazing learning experience, a massive opportunity, and a huge labor of love. And in caps, love and labor, because it is a lot of labor and it is a lot of love. I would say, one of the things that I've, again, learned by trying, failing, and then reflecting was that leadership is not what you do with people, it's what you do with people, right? So it's not about telling people what my vision is and then making them do it, but it's about bringing them along and co-creating with them at the same time. So, the story of Wynn, we had that idea, right? So we're in these rooms, having these hunches again, and just seeing this massive gap in the innovation field through our own daily experience, and then we said, well, we can't be the only people thinking this way, that there's a gender gap in our field, that we're both excited about innovation, but we also are not excited about the gender gap. And we said, well, what if we invite all the women from our competitor firms? So back then we used to work at a global design firm called Fahrenheit 212. And we went to our CEO and said, well, how would you feel if we invited women from all our top competitors for dinner at our office? And we had a conversation about how they feel about the gender gap in innovation and what we should do about it together as a collective. And I remember he said, well, is that like Pepsi inviting Coca-Cola for drinks and trying to change the world? And we're like, yeah, that's exactly on point. And he thought we were completely crazy, but he said, look, I think it's crazy, but I trust you. Just cover the walls, because as any innovation firm, you basically have rooms with whiteboards of inspiration and whiteboards and drawings and doodles. He said, just cover the work and do your dinner or drinks with all our competitors, and then come back to me. And to me, that's really emblematic of what leadership is, and bringing people along. I mean, that example to me is a testament to two things: is that when you identify a problem, right, that people share. So the first thing is just understanding what people are. So you can actually get, even the competitors can be brought together for dinner and share their insights about a problem that they think is really important. And then you can also, and then you can take those competitors and align them against a shared goal. Mm-hmm. So really diverse people with different backgrounds, of opposing beliefs, and we've proven this with Wynn. I mean, we have people from different political parties, religious beliefs, sexual orientation, everything. You name it, geographic expansion, because we have people from Israel to Saudi, Brazil. I mean, we have people around the globe that I think probably look, feel, think completely differently, but they share one thing in common, which is our mission and our values, our belief. So I think we've proven that you can lead, not by telling them what your vision is, but by seeing where they are and then aligning with them that common vision, and then bringing everybody along. That's been the model of Wynn. Everything that we are, from the programming and how we train women, which is completely co-created by different ambassador firms at every market, to the way our board meetings are run, which you're a part of. Everybody has a very equitable, equal, appropriate way to engage, and we really want to make sure that it's everybody's organization. I could be one of the co-founders, but to me, it's all about what do people think and feel. I oftentimes actually solicit the most feedback, and I ask many questions from our interns and our fellows, right? We have college students that are volunteering for Wynn, and I'm always curious what they have to say, how they feel I'm leading, how they feel the organization is leading, because I think their voice as students volunteering is just as important as one of our board members.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. What do you look for when you bring people along? And I've, sort of had the privilege of observing you through a hiring process and so forth. There's something to be said about the qualities and caliber that you look for. Could you illustrate that for us?
Sure. So I would say that for me, hiring people, so, both hiring people for full-time professional paid positions at work, as well as recruiting volunteers for Wynn, probably approach it the same way. Is I believe in this framework of values, abilities, and skills. So values are things that you probably can't teach or retrain. It's quite hard. It's the things that that are nurtured, developed, come about in your childhood, most likely. Things like integrity, loyalty, and the belief system that quite literally governs your life. So some of these things for me are non-negotiables. So, with Wynn, one of them is generosity. We just believe that it's all about sharing. It's about being active sharers. So with values, I try to screen for those first by asking for personal stories and anecdotes. Then on abilities, for me, people are wired different ways, right? And what sparks joy for them probably is connected to what they're equipped and good at doing easily. So abilities are things like conceptual thinking, problem solving, and so on. So I screen for those depending on what role, expectations, requirements are. And then the last thing is skills. So I actually believe that, skills are things you can train people, and especially people that have a flexible mindset. So it's less important for me that somebody knows how to use an XYZ program or language or specific terminology application. But it's more important about being excited and being open to learning it, right? So that's sort of how I'd approach it. And I would say I look for values and abilities the most, because I truly believe that if you find somebody who really shares your belief system as an organization and that has some innate abilities that both spark joy for them to do and that aren't needed for your organization, you can virtually teach almost anything, and especially in the innovation field, because what you learn today will be outdated tomorrow. So you have to basically retrain yourself anyway on an ongoing basis.
Speaking of which, what do you see as the most important thing for women, especially, to develop as we look forward, with the pace of change and the pace of innovation and everything changing so quickly? What would your advice be to listeners to develop that one key skill?
That one key skill. Something that, there are two levels to it. I think at a high level, just embracing humanity and not forgetting that we're humans is very just important. So I think as we think about innovation, technology, and where we are in the world, I think there's so much focus on automation and very tech-enabled activities and outputs. And I think understanding the importance of humanity and what we do is really important. But the way it comes to life, a specific skill that I think is really important for women is collaboration skills. So virtually everything today is done collaboratively, whether you're working in an in-person team environment, remote teams, hybrid teams, embedded teams. I mean, the beauty of technology is that it's broken many paradigms, reduced barriers, right? And democratize how we work. We don't have to physically come to the same place to do something, which means that we have to be very flexible, comfortable, and fluid in different collaboration paradigms. So I would say with women, I would really, and that's something that we have brought in different ways to the Wynn programming, is how do we effectively collaborate with different kinds of people in different channels, in different markets, and so on, in a way that not only focuses on diversity, because I think it's one of the topics that everyone is obsessed with, which I completely, obviously when we think about diversity, but it's inclusivity, right? So when you collaborate, how do you bring different people along? And especially those people that you don't agree with, because oftentimes in those tensions, disagreements, debates are sparks and sort of exciting things that could change the way you might approach something. So collaboration probably would be my number one thing to focus on.
Fantastic. So collaboration is something that you have done very effectively, not just within the organization, but also building incredible collaborative partnerships with really creating an ecosystem that allows you to accomplish goals very effectively. What advice would you give to someone who's just perhaps starting out in their career, does not have this huge network, especially an influential network? How would you recommend them even beginning that process of building relationships where you have the support and advocacy of the people you need to accelerate your career?
Yeah. If I reflect back on my life, I would say that without the people that were there to support me and that continue to support me, I would not be where I am by any stretch of any imagination at all. I've the mentors, advisors, sponsors I've had, some of them have been with me for decades at this point. I still, the person that taught me how to run track in high school and then basically mentored me to be the track captain. I mean, he's still one of my mentors, and he now is a partner at a VC fund, and we have an amazing relationship. I would say it's really important for women to understand the value of relationships to grow and fuel their careers, for sure. I think where many women, where they feel, where they trip up is in thinking about relationships as networking only versus thinking about what are things, I'm starting out in my career, in my example, actually some of my mentors I've met in high school or even middle school. And how did I meet them? It was not focused on networking. It was really first focused on me understanding what I'm interested in. So let's just use the example of track and running. I actually hated running, but I wanted to learn because I thought it was interesting. So I started running. I joined the track team. And then the captain of the team said, well, I think you have potential. I'll teach you how to run faster, better, more effectively. But that conversation, those running practices and meets were anchored in a shared interest, right? So we had something in common. So I think the advice I would give is don't focus on those, on building big, lofty networks or connections. Embrace your authentic self. What are your true interests, your passions? Because if you find what you're passionate about and if you immerse yourself, embrace it in those fields, you will find a constellation of people that also do the same thing in different various ways. And as you pull all these threads and pursue your passion, you're going to get stuck on things. You will have to solve problems, and you will naturally engage with different people in a way that's really anchored in that shared conversation. And as life goes on and you pursue your passions, you sort of swim, through life by deepening those relationships. Another example that I like to use is I moved to the US and I was really bad, obviously, at English. And I remember when I was in college, I got a C on my English paper the same week that I basically got a huge rejection letter from the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs. When I was in college, I had a dream of becoming either a foreign service officer or an editor-in-chief of a foreign service publication. And then same week, I basically almost failed an English paper and then also got this giant fat rejection letter which said that I have no grammar, punctuation, understanding, and skills of the English language in bold. And, I said, you know what, that's okay. I then took more English classes and then reapplied the next year to basically check commas and periods for the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs. And then, by year 4, I rose to be the editor-in-chief of the entire publication. I was the first undergraduate editor-in-chief of I think it was a graduate school publication. And the founder of that publication was on that editorial committee. So I emailed him and I said, hey, I want to tell you my story, that you guys first rejected me and then now I'm editor-in-chief. And I want to thank you for first failing me so that I can learn English. And, he, to this day, that email, then we had coffee, and now, he went to my wedding, I went to his wedding. We are amazing close friends, and he is also one of my mentors. But again, it was really sparked by my interest, and actually, in this case, failing really miserably and then learning how to add commas and periods.
I love the specificity of your recommendation is, be authentic, like discover what you're truly passionate about, engage in it, find the people you can learn from, put in the work, and then the relationships will naturally emerge. Because what you tapped into is something that a lot of women struggle with is networking is a bad word. There's just this discomfort with networking or networking events. And yet there's tremendous power in relationships. Or on the flip side, there's a lot of women that have a lot of relationships, but don't know how to leverage those in terms of accomplishing a shared vision or a mission.
Completely. And something that I've seen with myself is the word networking is so overwhelming, and it implies a transaction. Versus I think with women, or what I found with myself, is that I'm more inclined to be authentic and to focus more on building, and to your point, nurturing a relationship. So when you embrace your interests, you pursue them. In those conversations, even you just sound more excited because you are excited versus you're feigning excitement about something.
Yeah, because when you combine authenticity and generosity, it comes naturally. And then you want to be around that person and you want to help them. And that's really the foundation of any great relationship. Totally. So speaking of relationships, you have managed a whole bunch of different things, including a great marriage and 3 kids. So tell us a little bit about how do you manage work-life balance? Because anyone looking at your profile, the first question is, how does she even do it? And she can do it effortlessly. So let's give us a peek, behind the scenes. What is a hack or a habit or some, things you could advise us on?
Yeah. It's funny because I would never say that it's all put together. It's probably, from my perspective, all chaotic. Although people ask me a lot, how does this all look so seamless? I think the way it sort of all comes together is, it's rooted in a solid foundation. And I would say, for me, it's less of the marital or like the marriage contract, but it's more about a true, genuine partnership. I've been lucky to find my husband who truly shares my values system, my beliefs, my principles, and we have a very good understanding as partners. So it's less about asking him or expecting things from him, but it's all about, we have a shared vision for our life, and then how do we make it work on a daily basis? So I would say, number 1, find a good partner, and make sure that you're not going after the shiny, distractful things that are in movies and shiny magazines, that you're going after what's true in your heart, and the values that you think are important to build a happy life for yourself. So I think that's probably, advice 1. Advice 2 that I actually got from my grandmother, who was a math teacher. She passed a few years ago. She was a math teacher in a village in Russia, and she had 8 children. I don't know how. One of them was my mother, but she would say when I was growing up that, remember that it's never a good time to have children, like never, ever in your life. Like it's just not like, it's not like there's going to be a moment that, hey, Alfia, today is the day. And she said, have kids whenever you want, because life will mold itself to your changing needs. And I think I took that advice to heart, because I had my first child in graduate school, in business school specifically, where I think literally I was the first person in my business school to have had a child in business school, to the point where people had no idea how to process that information, or, I was in labor finishing one of my exams because they didn't know how to give me time. Anyway, long stories, but that was a fun experience. But, I sort of said, if children and having a big family is important to me, that I'll just do it. And then as long as I'm doing a good work at work, as long as I'm fulfilling my needs and partnerships to my partner, my husband, and, doing those things, that life will sort of mold itself. I think a lot of women select themselves out of their dreams, whether getting married, finding children, and so on, really early, versus thinking about life holistically and then just having children, and then that kind of sort of works. I think on a daily basis, what's really worked well for me is actually ruthless prioritization. That it's really important when you have many things happening to really distinguish noise from signal, because content today is really abundance. Like there's, it's just everywhere. So on a daily basis, something that I do, this is very tactical, but I create a vision every morning, actually every night now, to save time. I create a vision for my next day, and I quite literally think of it as a movie. And I say, I'm going to wake up, and if it's a movie, what's the first part, where I'm going to be? So, so I quite literally on a piece of paper say it's February 19th, and I say from 8 to 9 I'll be working out, from 9 to 10 I'm doing this, and I lay out every single hour and where I'll be, what I'll be doing. And then at the bottom of the page, I create 4 boxes where I can process my day and the priorities. So I have a box of top priorities for my work, my day job, and my key goals, which is the most important during the day. Then I have a box that's for Wynn, which, it's a volunteer position for me, but oftentimes I work on Wynn things at night, a lot on weekends, but as things come up in my brain, I just put them in that other box. So it's all captured in that other section. And then I have a section, my family. And then I have a section, the 4th box, that's called Before I Go. Big, yeah. And that's where I put things that I just have to accomplish before I go back from the office to home. Like just key priorities. I have to send this email. I have to buy these flowers. I have to do this thing. I have to call this person. I have to close my computer, whatever that is. But I put that there so that, there are things that are small, that are super draining from a cognitive level perspective, because you're thinking about doing them, but you forget. So, those 4 boxes are really good at prioritizing work, family, civic engagement, and things that have to just get done. And then creating that movie for the day. I've been doing it for years, probably, I think since high school, probably, or college. It just helps create because then you're in control of the movie called your life, right? Because every episode is then a week, it's a month, it's a year, it's your life.
Wow. I absolutely love that framework. And thank you for sharing that, because it's clearly, I see the end result of that, of your ability to accomplish so many different things and have so many different areas of your life, keep moving and yet have, balance as well as integration between all of that. So I can see how the framework would enable that. That's incredible. One thing before we move on from that topic, I'm curious about, is there something that you would guide, especially young moms, that may have that, because we see a lot of drop off in mid-career level, where you're at a manager level or middle management level, and then there's life pressures that build up as well. And oftentimes, women will choose to opt out instead of continuing down that path. What guidance would you give to someone, at that stage of their career that is perhaps struggling to keep it all together between, home and being a mom and their careers, and is just wrought with guilt? How would you just frame that for them?
Yeah, there is so much in there. What's been effective for me, I think, again, is it's not the absence of guilt or trying to kill it, but it's about recognizing that as a feeling and then moving past it. So, right, I've, in my, one of the things that I also saw in my life growing up, because I was basically raised by a single mother, is that life is uncertain. And that you just never know where, things could happen to anybody or anything. And that for me, it's really important that I work. So if I know that I have to work, it's important for me to work, then that's just my reality. So I should not feel then guilty about work. I mean, it's just one of the things that I have to do to sustain my family. So one of the things that was helpful is knowing that I can never be just with the children or be just at work, that there will just always be a compromise or a balancing act. Some days, I'm more focused on my family and their needs. Other days, we switch, and then I'm more focused on my job, and my husband's with the children. So I think recognizing that, the guilt is not going to go away, but then understanding that if you push the constraints, right, I have to work, I have to have a family, then it becomes easier to digest it and sort of instead focus on the moment. What's been helpful for me is, I think one of my friends, she had this quote on her social media. It's keeping your heart where your feet are. So, when you're at work, very focused on the job, but when you're home, you're really focused on the children. And again, and the same applies to Wynn. If I'm volunteering and if I'm focused on the nonprofit work, that I'm only focused on Wynn. And then treating them as a portfolio over time versus trying to balance things on a very tiny, tiny daily, hourly level. Because as a human being, you'll never be able to do all things at once, but it's about the longer term, right? And just showing to your children that, that when you're there with them, you can be truly present and mindful. And then the same applies to the other commitments. I think, on the being a young mother and feeling that burden, I've definitely been there. I would say with every child, felt exponentially the pressure of just trying to do it all and just feeling very burnt out. And I've learned, again, to be more vulnerable and to ask for help. I think it truly takes a village. So having the support network, your family, your friends, finding different communities and groups, local parenting groups, has really been transformational for me, because it's given me a perspective, a lot of advice, and a lot of practical, just tangible support to get through the day. So being a super woman does not mean that you are invincible and can do it all. It's actually about recognizing what you can't do and not saying no, but saying yes to yourself and finding that balance. Just, being in control of that balance versus sort of letting things take over your own life.
That's excellent advice. My gosh, you've been absolute fountain of wisdom. Thank you so much, Alfia. Your perspectives on things, as well as very specific, tangible advice, is going to serve so many women worldwide. So I'm so grateful to have you on the show and to get your thoughts and perspectives and be able to share your story and your strategies with everyone. What would be the best way for our listeners to connect with you, especially if they want to contribute their time and their resources to supporting women in innovation, or even perhaps attending events and ways to get engaged? How can they connect with you or with Wynn?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for this incredible opportunity. I hope some of this, or at least a tiny bit, is helpful. I've shared mostly stories of how I failed and then reflected and learned something. So,
like a true innovator.
It's all been pilots called my life, and as I pilot things, I learn. So the best way to contact Wynn would be our website, which is womeninnovation.co. So it's not com, it's just co. Or they could just Google Women in Innovation and that shows up. And then we welcome volunteers all the time, and they can join our network, our community through the site. And then there should be contact information for how they can apply and gauge interest in different volunteer opportunities in our current markets, which are San Francisco, London, New York. We're also expanding. We will be expanding into new markets around the globe, which is super exciting. So they could also include that information there. And if they want to contact me, they could email me at Alfia at womeninnovation.co. Or also, I believe if they find my full name on our website, they can contact me through my social media, which is LinkedIn and Instagram.
Excellent. Well, there you have it, folks. We've got incredible advice and strategies from Alfia. Be sure to connect with her, follow her on social media, as well as check out Women in Innovation and see, be part of the movement, contribute your time and your resources if you're interested in volunteering, and be part of changing the world. Thank you again, Alfia. And let's get you back to the rest of your movie today.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are so grateful that you've chosen to listen to ours. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources referenced in this episode. And be sure to take the quiz on the website. Your score will tell you where you are, what helps you gain momentum, and what holds you back. You'll also get a free guide with cutting-edge career strategies. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your comments and topic suggestions on IamBeyondBarriers.com. And we'll be sure to address them in future episodes. If you enjoyed our show today, please subscribe and rate the podcast, or just tell a friend about it. See you next episode.